The sun bled across the desert horizon, its light scattered by the transparent domes of the Coalition training complex. The air smelled faintly of ozone and oil, synthetic, manufactured precise. Rows of soldiers in composite armor lined the firing range, their weapons gleaming under the morning glare. Amid them stood Lieutenant Commander James Harker, the British instructor whose reputation for precision had become both legend and warning. His voice carried the clipped authority of decades on the field. Winds at 4 knots, cross vector northeast. Adjust or miss. And missing, he said, looking down the line, isn't something we do here. He spoke with that particular British confidence that seemed equal parts charm and challenge. The recruits, a mixed batch from across Earth's military alliances, nodded and took their positions. Their exosuits hummed as sensors aligned and helmets projected data overlays. Harker's gaze drifted toward the newcomer standing slightly apart from the group. She was lean, her uniform unadorned except for the subtle insignia of the U.S. Navy SEALs. Her eyes, pale and unreadable, studied the range in silence. She had yet to say a word since arriving 2 days earlier. Lieutenant Sarah Kane, Harker called, his tone casual but edged. The famous SEAL sniper. I'd say welcome, but you look like you'd rather be anywhere else. She turned toward him, her movements smooth, measured. I'm exactly where I need to be, sir. A few of the recruits smirked. Harker smiled too, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll see about that. Out here, we don't rely on reputation. We rely on results. Kane gave a small nod and walked to the firing line. She moved with an economy of motion, no wasted effort. Harker noted it but said nothing. Instead, he launched into his demonstration. He lifted his rifle, a sleek, matte black rail sniper with a stabilizing harness around his arm, and took position. Observe, he said. The weapon's scope hummed softly as it synced with the targeting grid. He fired. The projectile tore through the air, a streak of blue light, before striking the holographic target nearly 2 kilometers away. The digital screen flickered and confirmed, dead center. Perfect, he said, standing. Textbook British precision. The recruits murmured approval. Kane's expression didn't change. She adjusted the rifle on the table beside her, aligning the sights without a word. Harker noticed. You planning to shoot, Lieutenant? Or are you still calibrating your ego? That drew a few laughs. She met his gaze without flinching. Your crosswind compensation was off by half a degree. You hit center because the grid recalibrated, not because your aim was flawless. The laughter died quickly. Harker's smile tightened. Is that so? Then perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the proper technique. She lowered herself onto the mat, her movements deliberate but unhurried. Her breathing steadied, chest rising and falling in controlled rhythm. Through the scope, the world narrowed to the target and the faint shimmer of heat across the sand. Want to try? Harker asked with an amused smirk. Always, she said. Her finger tightened on the trigger. A single pulse cracked through the air. The round struck the target exactly where his had, then split it. The range AI blinked and recalculated. 0 deviation. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the recruits whispered, "That's not possible." Harker frowned. "Do it again." Kane reset the rifle, adjusted her sight by a fraction, and fired. Another perfect shot, clean, decisive, almost too precise to believe. "Triple check her readings," Harker ordered, masking his irritation. "That's a system error." The tech officer tapped at a hollow console. "No error, sir. Calibration verified. Human input, 99.9% confidence." Harker stared at her. "You use some kind of autocorrector." "I know the tricks, Lieutenant." She stood, brushing sand from her gloves. "No tricks, just training." "Training," he echoed, voice low. "SEALs must have changed since my day." "Maybe," she said, "or maybe we just stopped underestimating people." There was a tension in her tone, not anger exactly, but history, the kind that didn't need explaining. Harker studied her closely now, noticing the faint scar running from her temple down behind her ear, the small shimmer of an implant connection. Nothing illegal, standard augmentation, but the kind that hinted at experience beyond simple fieldwork. The silence stretched until one of the recruits coughed nervously. Harker straightened, forcing a chuckle. "All right, Lieutenant Kane. Looks like we got ourselves a sharpshooter. Let's see if it was skill or luck. You're on point for the next drill." She gave a single nod, expression unreadable. For the next hour, the team cycled through simulations, moving targets, shifting wind grids, light interference. Harker watched her work. Her focus was uncanny. She made micro-adjustments no AI could predict, fired without hesitation, and hit every target as if the bullet itself sought the mark. The others grew quiet, their initial curiosity replaced by something closer to respect. By the time the drill ended, the sun had risen fully above the domes, casting sharp shadows across the range. Sweat glistened on the recruits' faces. Harker removed his helmet and wiped his brow, still trying to reconcile what he'd seen. He approached her as the others packed their gear. "Not bad," he said lightly, "though I prefer to teach before I'm outclassed." She glanced up. "You don't look like someone easily outclassed, Commander." "Flattery?" he asked, smiling. "Observation," she replied. Something about her tone, neutral, honest, without malice, unsettled him more than arrogance would have. He'd spent his career among soldiers who needed to prove themselves. She didn't. Her calm was the kind born from surviving something that stripped away the need to impress. As she moved to leave, Harker called after her. "Tell me something, Lieutenant. Where did you train to shoot like that?" She paused, back-turned. Places where missing wasn't an option. Then she walked away, leaving him staring after her. The recruits gathered their equipment in silence, occasionally glancing between the two officers. Harker could feel their curiosity pressing at him, waiting for him to make a joke or dismiss the moment. But he said nothing. When the range cleared, he stayed behind. The wind carried fine dust across the scorched sand. He set his rifle down and knelt where she had lain. Through the scope, the world shrank again, the target flickering faintly at the far end of the range. He exhaled, steadied, and fired. The round struck true, but a hair off center. The readout glowed with quiet indifference. Deviation 0.02. Harker lowered the rifle slowly, the weight of the number settling into his chest. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not pride, something closer to anticipation. He looked down the empty line and muttered under his breath, "All right, Lieutenant Kane, let's see what else you've got." By the next morning, word of the perfect shot had spread across the training complex. Recruits whispered in corridors. Instructors glanced her way with cautious curiosity, and every range tech wanted to see the data feed from a rifle. Sarah ignored it all. She moved through the day with the same quiet precision that marked her every motion. The attention neither fed nor distracted her. It simply didn't matter. Harker, on the other hand, felt the shift like grit in a finely tuned barrel. He had built his reputation on composure and mastery, but something about Kane's calm disassembled that armor one silent stare at a time. Pride kept him sharp. Curiosity made him restless. He found her on the range again, long before the others arrived. The sky was still gray, domes fogged from the morning condensation. She was prone, eyes fixed through the scope, firing into the digital void of early drills. The crack of her rifle broke the silence every few seconds, precise, rhythmic, unwavering. "You don't waste daylight, do you?" he said, stepping beside her. "Daylight's unreliable," she replied without looking up. "I prefer consistency." He crouched, watching the targeting screen flicker. Each round hit within a fraction of perfect center. "I checked the logs," he said. "No anomalies. No tech boosts beyond regulation. You really are that good." Her tone didn't shift. "If you're hoping I'll tell you how, I can't. Some things you just learn the hard way." "That sounds like a story," he said. She lowered the rifle, finally meeting his gaze. "It's not one I tell." The simplicity of her words stopped him. Most soldiers he knew wore their histories like armor, eager to display their scars. Kane carried hers like a concealed blade, never shown, always ready. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "People are starting to talk. The others think you're some kind of prototype. They say the SEALs use augmented vision now, neural targeting, predictive AI. Rumors travel faster than bullets, she said, and they're about as accurate. He smiled despite himself. You got a sharp tongue for someone so quiet, only when it serves a purpose. The edge in her voice wasn't defiance. It was self-defense, the kind honed by years of being tested. Harker recognized it because he'd worn it once too. They worked through another round of drills in silence. Her shots remained flawless. His, though competent, drifted ever so slightly. It gnawed at him, not because she was better, but because he didn't understand how. He'd spent decades reducing uncertainty, learning to measure every factor: wind, distance, humidity, human error, and she seemed to erase uncertainty altogether. When the session ended, she began packing her gear. Harker spoke before she could leave. "Lieutenant Kane," he said, his tone formal again. "Permission to ask a personal question." She hesitated, then nodded. "Why transfer here? You could be anywhere. Command doesn't send SEALs to train coalition recruits unless they're grooming them for something." Her gaze flickered toward the horizon, where the sun was rising beyond the domes. "I was assigned. They didn't ask where I wanted to go." "That's not an answer." "No," she said softly. "It isn't." He waited, but she said nothing more. Later that afternoon, during the strategy briefing, Harker watched her from across the command table. The other officers discussed simulation results, equipment budgets, and trainee performance, but his focus stayed fixed on her. She listened without interruption, her attention absolute. She didn't fidget, didn't seek approval, didn't perform. When she finally spoke, her words carried quiet authority. "The simulations are outdated," she said. "Real combat doesn't pause for recalibration. You should train them to shoot under variable data loss. Make the AI feed fail mid-operation." The room went still. The base commander frowned. "That's a level 3 drill. We don't run those outside special ops." Kane met his gaze evenly. "Then start." Harker couldn't help it. He smiled. The commander didn't notice, but he did. There was again, not arrogance, not challenge, just precision in human form. When the meeting adjourned, Harker caught up to her in the corridor. "You don't make many friends that way," he said. "I'm not here for that. So what are you here for?" She paused by the window, the light casting sharp lines across her face. "You ever lose someone on your watch, Commander?" He stiffened. "That's part of the job." "No," she said. "I mean lose someone because you hesitated. Because you waited for perfect conditions." He didn't answer. She didn't need him to. Her eyes returned to the range beyond the glass. "I joined the SEALs to make sure I never did that again. They trained me until hesitation wasn't part of my vocabulary." There was no pride in her voice, only the hard truth of someone who had seen the cost of uncertainty. Before he could reply, the alarm tone blared through the corridor. Red light pulsed overhead, the calm voice of the base AI cutting through the noise. "Priority alert. Unauthorized drone activity detected beyond perimeter. All instructors report to Operations Command." They moved as one, years of discipline overriding conversation. Inside the control center, screens lit up with data. Unidentified drones hovered beyond the desert ridge, their signatures unregistered. Not a direct threat yet, but close enough to raise concern. Harker took his station beside her. "Training drones gone rogue?" he suggested. "Too coordinated," she said, eyes narrowing. "Formation pattern looks military." She accessed the live feed, zooming in on the lead drone. Its markings were blurred, its movement erratic. A test, maybe, or probe. Either way, it wasn't supposed to be there. The commander's voice cut through the static. "Seal the range and recall all personnel. Kane, Harker, you'll coordinate a response team. We'll need recon within the hour." Harker nodded automatically, but his attention stayed on her. For the first time, he saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, not even tension, but recognition. "You've seen this before," he said quietly. She didn't deny it. "It's not the first time they've tested our defenses." "They?" Her jaw tightened. "Not enemies you'd recognize. Let's just say some projects don't stay classified forever." Before he could ask more, she turned and began issuing orders. Her voice was calm, efficient, commanding. The recruits obeyed without hesitation, as if instinctively aware that she operated on another level of clarity. Within minutes, they were suited and armed, moving across the dunes toward the ridge. The domes behind them shimmered like glass mirages in the morning light. Harker followed at her side, the hum of drones faint but rising. As they reached the high ground, the horizon came alive with motion. Half a dozen drones shifting formation, scanning, repositioning. Kane knelt, raised her rifle, and took a slow breath. "Just a recon, remember?" Harker said. "Recon begins with sight," she replied. Her first shot dropped the lead drone cleanly, its core bursting into static before it hit the sand. The rest scattered instantly. Harker cursed. "Now they know we're watching." "That was the point," she said, eyes still on the scope. "Sometimes you have to remind the ghosts you're not afraid of them." The words lingered long after the drones vanished. When they returned to base, the commander dismissed the team, but Harker and Kane were ordered to remain. As the doors sealed behind them, the room dimmed, and the commander's tone changed. "Lieutenant Kane," he said, "your reassignment just came through. Effective immediately, you're off training duty. New deployment, classified, lunar perimeter." Harker blinked. "The moon? That's combat territory." Kane didn't react. "Understood, sir." She saluted, turned, and left the room without a word. Harker stood frozen for a moment before following her into the corridor. "That's not just a reassignment," he said. "That's exile." She glanced back, the faintest hint of something, regret, maybe, passing through her expression. "No, Commander. That's where I belong." And with that, she walked away, leaving him staring after her as the echo of her boots faded down the hall. The shuttle tore through the stratosphere like a silver spear, its hull glowing against the curve of Earth below. Inside, Sarah sat strapped in near the viewport, her expression calm but unreadable. The low hum of the engines filled the cabin, punctuated only by the occasional flicker of readouts across the bulkhead. Across from her, Harker adjusted the straps of his combat harness, trying not to stare too long. He still didn't know how she had convinced command to let him join. A training officer had no business on a lunar deployment. Yet here he was, crammed into a seat beside a woman who had shattered every expectation he'd ever carried about what a soldier could be. "You didn't have to volunteer," she said without looking up. "Curiosity's a hell of a motivator," he replied. "Besides, someone has to make sure you don't embarrass the British delegation." Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You think I'd do that?" "I think you're capable of anything," he said. The words hung between them, heavy but honest. When the shuttle broke orbit, the moon loomed large, a sphere of dust and shadow. The surface glinted with the faint lights of human settlements, the outposts that mark humanity's new frontier. The lunar perimeter wasn't just a defensive line. It was the fragile edge of civilization itself. As they descended, Harker saw the outpost, a cluster of reinforced domes connected by metallic corridors, surrounded by automated turrets and drone nests. The landing pad shimmered with thin frost, reflecting the stars above. The airlock hissed open, and the chill struck like a living thing. Lunar gravity made every movement deliberate, measured, careful. The base commander greeted them with a curt nod. "Lieutenant Kane, Commander Harker, welcome to Selene 9. We've been tracking unidentified drone swarms for the past 72 hours. They're adaptive, evasive, and they don't match any known signatures. We believe they're probes from one of the defunct orbital syndicates, but intelligence is inconclusive. Autonomous or remote?" Sarah asked. "Unknown, but they're testing our blind spots." She nodded. "Then we'll close them." Harker followed her to the observation deck, where the moon stretched out like an endless sea of silver ash. In the distance, faint glimmers moved just beyond the horizon. Through the scope of her rifle, she watched their patterns, chaotic but purposeful. "They're learning," she murmured. "You can tell that from a flicker on a screen. Patterns don't lie. They always tell you who's pulling the trigger." He studied her profile in the dim light. She looked the same as she always did, steady, unreadable, but her eyes carried a weight he hadn't seen before. This wasn't just another mission to her. It was personal. Night on the moon wasn't like night on Earth. There was no wind, no sound, no scent, only the endless silence of vacuum pressing in from every direction. The two of them established overwatch at the ridge above the perimeter, their suits linking directly into the base network. Every movement echoed through the comms, every breath audible. Visibility low, Harker said. Thermal interference across the plane. Doesn't matter, she replied. They're out there. He scanned the horizon. You ever think you might be chasing ghosts? Ghosts don't learn formations, she said. The first contact came 2 hours later, a shimmer of motion against the dust. 6 drones, low-flying, triangular in shape. Their surfaces refracted the faint light, almost invisible to sensors. Permission to engage, she said. Granted, came the commander's voice over the channel. Sarah exhaled slowly, her gloved finger curling around the trigger. The rifle's charge built in a low hum before discharging in a flash of white. The nearest drone shattered, fragments scattering in a silent bloom. The others reacted instantly, weaving through the air in a chaotic dance. Harker took position beside her, aligning his rifle. They're fast, he muttered. They're learning faster. One drone swooped low, sensors blinking. Sarah fired again, missed by a hair. The shot ricocheted against the rock, sending a burst of dust upward. Harker grinned. First miss I've seen you make. She ignored him, recalibrating. They're predicting our intervals. Meaning they're adapting to human timing. He didn't have time to respond. The next wave hit hard. 10 drones, diving from high altitude. The 2 snipers shifted position, rolling behind cover as plasma bursts scorched the ground around them. The air crackled with static. Harker fired twice, destroying one drone, grazing another. The feedback burned through his arm, but he didn't flinch. Sarah rose to one knee, her rifle pivoting in a smooth arc. 3 shots, 3 kills. The rest scattered, retreating into the shadows beyond sensor range. Status? Came the commander's voice. Partial neutralization, Sarah said. They'll regroup. Then we prepare, Harker added. They spent the next hour reinforcing their position, scanning data, adjusting angles. Harker's respect for her grew with every minute. She moved with machine-like focus, but human intuition, a combination he'd never witnessed. When the next assault came, it was larger. 20 drones this time, in coordinated waves. The sky filled with streaks of light and dust. Harker caught himself holding his breath as Sarah switched firing modes, her rifle glowing faintly blue. Each shot was deliberate, graceful, devastating. Then his scope flashed red. A drone had flanked them from behind. He spun, too late. The plasma discharge struck the rock inches from his head. The shockwave threw him backward, helmet cracking. Kane, he shouted, disoriented. She turned instantly, eyes narrowing. The world slowed. She pivoted, dropped to her stomach, and fired without hesitation. The round tore through the air and hit the drone dead center. It exploded in a silent burst of light. Harker lay there breathing hard, his visor half-fogged. She crawled to him, checking his vitals. You all right? Bruised pride, he said, and a cracked helmet. You should have ducked sooner. You should have warned me sooner. Her voice softened. I didn't think I had to. They stayed there for a moment, their suits covered in fine lunar dust, the battle fading into silence. Above them, Earth hung in the sky, blue, distant, perfect. He looked at her through the cracked visor. You've done this before, haven't you? Off-world combat. She nodded slightly. Mars. Titan. Places that don't make the reports. I was part of a team until one mission went wrong. We lost 3 people because I hesitated to pull the trigger. That's the last time I let emotion interfere with calculation. So now you don't hesitate at all. Not when lives depend on it. He studied her for a long moment. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Proving that hesitation's gone. She didn't answer. The silence was her confirmation. A new alert flickered across their HUDs. Energy signatures rising beneath the surface. Harker frowned. Underground movement? Not movement, she said, scanning the readout. Activation. Before either could react, the ridge beneath them trembled. A massive drone, larger than any they'd seen, rose from the dust, its hull glinting with an eerie red light. It wasn't reconnaissance anymore. It was war. Harker's voice dropped. You think this is what they were testing for? She steadied her rifle. No, this is what they were waiting for. The machine turned its sensors toward them, charging a weapon. She took aim, exhaled, and fired the first shot. The blast struck the creature's core, splitting its armor. Hit confirmed, she said. Nice shot. Harker muttered, reloading. Don't congratulate me yet, she replied. It's still moving. And as the lunar dust rose around them like smoke, the two soldiers braced for the next strike. Side by side, the teacher and the student, no longer opponents but allies forged in silence and fire. The lunar surface was still trembling when the smoke began to clear. Harker's ears rang with static, and his visor flickered with damage alerts. The colossal drone lay half buried in the crater below, its hull cracked open like the shell of a dead insect. Sarah stood over it, rifle steady, eyes fixed on the smoldering core. A faint red glow pulsed from within, like a dying heartbeat refusing to stop. Think it's done? Harker asked, voice rough through the comms. No, she said. Machines don't die that easy. As if on cue, the glow flared again. She didn't hesitate. One final shot, clean and precise, cutting through the core. The light went out instantly. Silence reclaimed the crater. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the low hum of their suits adjusting to the temperature drop. Harker lowered his weapon and let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of everything unspoken between them. That was impressive, he said. Necessary, she replied. He smiled faintly. You've got a strange definition of modesty. She glanced his way, the faintest trace of warmth in her tone. And you've got a strange definition of survival. They made their way back to the outpost under the dim light of Earthrise. The long shadow of the ridge stretched before them, distorted by the fractured terrain. As they approached the airlock, the commander's voice broke over the comms. Perimeter secure. Stand down, both of you. Debrief in 10. Inside, the decontamination field washed over them in waves of static. Harker unsealed his helmet and drew a deep breath, relishing the taste of oxygen recycled 1,000 times. Sarah removed hers more slowly, setting on the rack beside his. Her face looked drawn, not from fear, but from exhaustion hidden behind control. The commander met them in the central chamber, his expression unreadable. We've analyzed the wreckage, he said. That drone wasn't built by any known syndicate. Its architecture matches nothing in the registry. It's something new, or something old that's been re-engineered. Purpose? Sarah asked. Data gathering, most likely. You destroyed its transmitter before it could upload. But it's safe to assume whatever sent it now knows it's gone. So it'll come back, she said. Eventually. The commander's gaze lingered on her. You did well. Both of you. The council's already seen the feed. You'll be debriefed on Earth once the transport returns. Harker nodded. And until then, rest. You've earned it. The commander turned away, leaving them alone in the dim chamber. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else. A kind of shared understanding that words couldn't touch. Harker leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. So that's it? We shoot some alien tech, save the day, and go home. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She stared through the viewport, where the stars burned cold and distant. You ever notice how the word home stops meaning the same thing after too many missions? He studied her profile. Yeah, I know the feeling. They sat there for a while, two soldiers suspended between duty and fatigue, neither willing to break the fragile stillness. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, almost human in its uncertainty. You asked me once why I was sent here. Truth is, this wasn't a punishment or a test. It was a precaution. The people who built those drones, whoever they are, were using data from my old missions. Someone wanted me close to the problem. Because you're the only one who can solve it, he said. Because I'm the only one who might understand it. He looked at her, and for the first time, saw past the armor and the discipline. Beneath it all was a woman haunted not by failure, but by the burden of never being allowed to fail again. Hours passed. The outpost settled into uneasy calm. Outside, lunar dust drifted like snow under the artificial lights. Harker couldn't sleep. He found her again on the observation deck, seated cross-legged beside the viewport, staring at Earth's faint glow. "Thought you'd be resting," he said quietly. "I don't rest easily." He joined her, sitting close enough to hear the faint rhythm of her breathing. "You know, back on Earth, you're already a legend. The footage from the range, the perfect shot, it's everywhere. They're calling you the deadliest shooter in the SEALs." Her eyes remained fixed on the stars. "Titles don't matter. Maybe not to you, but they inspire people." She turned slightly toward him. "Do they? Or do they just make people forget what it costs to earn them?" He couldn't argue with that. He thought of the recruits back on the training base, laughing, whispering about her precision, never once imagining the ghost behind it. "You've changed how I see things," he admitted. "I used to believe mastery came from control. You showed me it comes from acceptance." She gave a small, rare smile. "That's the trick. You can't fight chaos, you move through it." A soft chime echoed through the corridor. The transport shuttle had arrived. Their time on the moon was over. They suited up again in silence, stepping once more onto the gray plain. The horizon shimmered faintly, Earth hanging like a fragile jewel above them. As they approached the shuttle, Harker stopped and turned to her. "When we get back," he said, "you should teach. People need to learn from you." She shook her head. "People don't need another instructor. They need reminders that limits aren't real." Spoken like someone who's already surpassed them. Her gaze softened. Spoken like someone who finally understands why shoot. They boarded the shuttle, the engines igniting beneath them. As the lunar surface fell away, Harker looked down at the crater, the silent battlefield already fading into shadow. He realized he would never forget the way she stood there, unflinching against the impossible. The journey back was quiet. The cabin lights dimmed, and the hum of the engines filled the silence. Harker finally spoke, his voice low. "You ever think you'll stop? Stopping isn't in the training," she said. "But maybe one day I'll miss on purpose, just to feel human again." He smiled, though the thought unsettled him. "You'd hate it." "Probably," she said. "But I try." The shuttle pierced Earth's atmosphere, flames dancing across the hull. Through the viewport, dawn spread across the planet, streaks of gold cutting through the clouds. When they landed at the coalition base, reporters and officers waited beyond the security line. Cameras flashed. Harker stepped out first, blinking in the harsh light. Sarah followed, face calm as ever, indifferent to the chaos around her. One of the officers saluted. "Lieutenant Kane, the council requests your report immediately." She nodded, then turned briefly to Harker. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For remembering I'm not just a story." Before he could respond, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd of uniforms and cameras. He watched her go, knowing he'd probably never see her again. But something lingered, a sense that her story wasn't over, that the world would need her again when silence wasn't enough to keep the darkness at bay. Later, when he returned to his quarters, he found a message waiting on his terminal. It contained a single video file, the training range footage from weeks ago. He played it once more, the smirk, the challenge, the perfect shot splitting his own. The caption beneath read simply, "Want to try?" He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Deadliest shooter?" he murmured. "No, just the one who never misses twice." Outside, the night deepened, and somewhere far beyond the clouds, the moon waited, silent, watchful, and waiting for its next legend to return.